And welcome to the Dr. William Lester Show. Of course, I am your host, Dr. William Lester, and I want to thank you for checking out the show and listening. And I want to remind you that the show can always be heard on demand at Google+, the Blackwater Media channel, and the Dr. William Lester Show Facebook page. So, of course, one of the overriding themes that many of you who are Facebook followers know is the idea of cool vintage, all things vintage, all things retro, which is, I guess, kind of a personal motif of mine, a personal worldview, a personal life philosophy. And so I want to start off by, kind of explaining what that means. I'm sure a lot of you already know, but embracing the vintage aspects of life that are good. You hear a lot of people waxing poetically about the good old days, and I suppose that, whether the old days are good depends on who you are. There are lots of good things from the past that should always stay in the past. We throw it away, we trade it in for something new and improved. But there are aspects of retro lifestyle, vintage lifestyle that are good to hold on to, and I think a lot of those things are represented on the personal Facebook page. The William Lester Facebook page. You see a lot of those, or all of the postings there reflect those sentiments. Definitely not politically correct, but and that's kind of a sticking point, because there's a fine line, to be sure. There are some subtle distinctions that one has to make in their thinking, in their worldview, in their construct. And what I mean, for example, is this. I don't subscribe to bigotry and racist thinking or any of those type of things in any way, shape, or form. Don't tolerate them. Don't believe in them. I think they're poisonous. I think they're bad for everybody. And a lot of people engage in those type of things and take pride in the fact in saying that they're not politically correct. Well, they're not politically correct, but they're being stupid and ignorant. Because, like I said, I don't subscribe to any of those things, and at the same time, I don't kowtow to political correctness. And being not politically correct simply means you call things what they are. You view things and you articulate your thoughts and words as representative of what things are. If something's stupid, you say that it's stupid. If something's ugly, you say that it's ugly. If something's right or wrong, you say that it's right or wrong, good or bad, or what have you. If you like something, you say you like it. If you don't like it, you say you don't like it. That's what not being politically correct really means. So I just wanted to, get that out of the way so that, there are no areas of confusion here. I am a geek, and I like geeky stuff, and I use that a little bit in a tongue-in-cheek way, because I'm really applying it the way that the larger society applies it. When I say I'm a geek, it means I love science fiction and fantasy and things like that. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit tonight. talk about the geeky side of things, and maybe some of you guys have some similar affinities for it. I've always been like a fan of like comic books and superheroes and things like that, and the larger society kind of categorizes that as geeky and nerdy or whatever. But to me, it's always been, kind of cool. Being a retro aficionado, I always enjoyed the classic science fiction and fantasy films, horror films, things like that. I've always been a fan of, and growing up, and before a lot of this is generational. So a lot of how you receive some of the things I talk about will absolutely depend upon your generation. When did you grow up? And I always talk about Batman, a popular character for a long time. And when I was a little boy, of course, there was the Batman television show, Adam West, and so on. And what always sticks out in my mind, and I've talked about this with friends and relatives and people who know me, but when I was a little boy, 6, 7, 8 years old, a lot of people were transitioning from black and white to color televisions. And again, generationally speaking, it may seem very quaint and silly to a lot of people, but if you are of that generation, you know what a big deal it was. And so the Batman TV show was, a standout TV show to folks of my generation, and even folks who may be a little older. But for those of you who are familiar with the show, when the show came on, there was a Batman logo on the screen, right? And down at the bottom of the screen, it said, in color. Because again, a lot of the TV shows were in transition. A lot of the new shows like Batman and Star Trek were, started in color. A lot of other shows transitioned from black and white to color. Shows like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and the Andy Griffith Show, they transitioned into color at some point. And so we had this black and white Zenith television on a push cart, so you could move it around from room to room. So one day I came home from school, and in the den was a big new television set sitting there, a new Zenith color television set. And first of all, I've never seen a television that big. And again, it sounds quaint because today we are relatively accustomed to large screens and big screens and everything, but at that time it was kind of a big deal. I don't remember what the actual dimensions of the screen, what those dimensions were, but it was, compared to what I was used to, it was huge. And so my mother clicked on the TV, and of course this is Batman. It was like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or whatever, and I was lifted out of myself. It was a transcendental experience, because here's the Batman logo, and it seemed to be against a pink or orange background. And down at the bottom, of course, it said in color. And I'm thinking to myself, well, absolutely. Right? And for those of you who know this, it was a very colorful show. Like a living comic book. And I remember being speechless for a time. Which, of course, for me is a huge deal. I remember being speechless. And it's one of the things that stands out in my memory. Again, generationally speaking, if you're 30, you probably think this is a silly diatribe. But it was absolutely transformational. You just had to be there. And then, of course, all of these other programs, Star Trek. Of course, now it's in color now, and I'm watching it. And it's lots of bizarre imagery, science fiction. So all of these things were very exciting, very entertaining. All in the days, before we had 300 channels. You had 4 or 5 channels, and one of them was PBS, right? So I enjoyed all these programs. Ultraman was absolutely one of the formative, exciting boyhood adventures that I remember. And again, if you're familiar with the show, just bear with me. If you're not familiar with the show, it's something new that you're hearing. But Ultraman was a fantasy program, science fiction program, Japanese made show in the tradition and the style of Toho, which of course was the Japanese film studio which produced all of the great monster movies, the Godzilla and all of that. But it was a fantasy television show about this entity, this space ranger that came to Earth from the M78 Nebula. And he would do battle against these evil monsters and invading aliens and all kinds of things. And some people today would marginalize this kind of thing as to, well, this is the old monster in a man in a monster costume trampling on miniature cities, which is what they would also say about Toho. But I would say it's much more than that. And if that's all that you chalk it up to, I would tell you that you don't know how to watch and receive these type of things for what they are or for what they were. As hard as it is to grasp now, those type of programs were executed in the cutting edge special effects technology of the day. Just like TV shows and movies now. And so it's all relative. And it's not fair or sensible to take a television show that was made in 1966 and the special effects used at that time and compare it to what can be done today. It's just, it doesn't make sense to do that, because literally there is no comparison. But if you sit and watch it and look at the story that's unfolding and understand when it was made and how it was made, I think then you can start to appreciate it. And after you appreciate it, you may get to the point where you like it. And then you may get to the point where you have some affinity for it. And if you can do that, you're well on your way to, joining the rest of us, really. So Ultraman was one of those. And of course today, these things are available on DVD. If someone had told me years ago that these programs and these movies would be available in a format where you could pop it in and watch it anytime you want it, I just wouldn't have believed it. Right? Because the old saying, you don't know what you don't know. So that was, the idea of on-demand viewing was not part of anybody's construct. But being here now and being able to access these shows in that manner is wonderful. Star Trek, you pop in a DVD, maybe it's somewhere on Netflix, some other streaming format, some platform where you can watch it on demand. It's fantastic. Everything's been remastered, so it all looks great. Put on a pair of headphones, it sounds great. Everything's in HD. Because believe me, I remember what it used to look like. And watching these things in their remastered, platform is just like, candy at Christmas. I remember Johnny Quest. On my personal Facebook page, I always refer to Johnny Quest as the greatest guy cartoon of all time, because we have a running theme on that page about cool vintage guy stuff. And I think it is. It's the greatest guy cartoon of all time. Action, adventure, fantasy, science fiction, all of those elements, all of those genres mixed in. Well, now let me go to my humidor. This is a Fonseca cigar, so it's absolutely a premium hand-rolled Dominican cigar, very enjoyable, and I'm going to enjoy this cigar with one of my favorite cocktails, which is just an old-fashioned highball. And of course, this is a classic guy drink, and of course, the exact ingredients could mean different things to different people, but I base mine on the way my father made it and my grandfather, and it's for me it's very simply just your favorite whiskey or bourbon or even scotch on ice with a slice of lemon or lime or both, maybe a cherry or two, with ginger ale. And if you choose, you can also use 7-Up. I've done it with both, but either is acceptable. And like I said, a lot of people really get hung up on brand names. So, we're certainly not going to do that here in terms of, well, this brand is better because it's a bigger, more well-known, more costly. We're not going to do that. There are many excellent whiskeys that would make a fantastic highball that you can get at a very a very moderate price point. And I mean, less than $20, for example. So, for example, I would use, to make my highball, I would use a brand called Ancient Age, which is a very old classic American brand. There's one called Early Times. I think it's maybe $12 or $13. The Ancient Age is, again, $11, $12, $13. I think Ancient Age has a gold label version that's $14, $15. A very smooth, enjoyable version. So, I by no means would suggest that you go out and spend some exorbitant amount of money on a bottle of something to make a great drink, because it's not necessary. It's not about that. And certainly on this show, we are not going to get into, trying to demonstrate to people, how much money we can spend on things. But anyway, but that's the classic American highball. And certainly, making cool vintage guy drinks and cocktails and things like that will be something that we will talk about on the show, and the cigars as well, and the other aspects of great cool vintage guy living. And there's an old saying that we adhere to, and it's going to be a mantra of the show, and it's that we're not here for a long time, we're here for a good time. And that's what we're going to be covering on this show, how to have a good time. But I referenced Johnny Quest. It started in 1964, Hanna-Barbera. It absolutely was one of those formative programs. The titular character was an adolescent boy, and the ancillary characters, his father, Dr. Benton Quest, Race Bannon Haji, and Bandit, who was his dog. But it was, every episode was this action adventure, fantasy, science fiction odyssey, really. Not a politically correct cartoon. There were violence, there were weapons, people died. Usually it was the bad guy who would get it in the end. But it was fantastic. It was marvelous. And Johnny Quest was a part of that stable of animated programming created by Hanna-Barbera. And they had others of a similar nature, like Space Ghost, which was a science fiction program, Birdman, Galaxy Trio, Mytor, the Herculoids also. But these were done they were rendered in a manner that had a level of relative realism and detail, which of course even to this day is something that animators hate to do. A lot of detail, a lot of shadowing, heavy black lines, really, really appealing style of animation that has largely been lost in the avalanche of computer animation. And I suppose that in a way it's the same. I watch a lot of the contemporary animation, and there's so much of it and everything, and all of these, Pixar and Disney, and everybody does it, and it sort of, it becomes like wallpaper after a time. You know what I mean? Where you don't even notice it anymore, and there's nothing compelling there. And so what I'm referring to kind of harkens back to a different aesthetic, a different viewing, a different entertainment aesthetic. So again, if you know what I'm talking about, I'm sort of preaching to the choir. If you don't know, it's something I absolutely recommend that you investigate. Again, all on DVD, all available somewhere on some digital platform for you to enjoy at your leisure. All of these programs. They were part of two types of viewing opportunities in those days. One was after school. There were always 3 or 4 hours after school where the programming was targeted for kids coming home from school. From 3 or 3:30 on until about 6 o'clock. You would get these great cartoons. And then, of course, there was the wonderful, magical, dreamy Saturday morning. And again, another generational reference. The Saturday morning cartoon from about 8 a.m. until noon. All of the networks were awash in these programs. Of course, at noon, then the more adult things would begin. And if you weren't there, it is almost impossible to convey to you how wonderful it was. And you might say, well, what's the big deal about cartoons? Well, it's the fact that it was special. It's the fact that, this was it. Today, you can find cartoons 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And while there's an element of fun and convenience to that, it's not special. It's not special because it's there for the taking anytime, anywhere. But in those days, there was a finite opportunity to watch these programs. And so, for that reason, it was special. As I got a little older, I was less and less interested in the lineup, the Saturday morning cartoon lineup. There were still, 2 or 3 that I would want to see. But the other thing that was happening started appealing to me. And it was the Saturday afternoon creature feature. And depending on where you grew up, it would be called something different, of course. But I can recall these wonderful, lazy Saturday afternoons with these great old monster movies. Sometimes they would run on Friday nights as well. And so there was a Friday night thing there too, which is like something that we can, talk about at great length. But that Saturday afternoon creature feature where they would run, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 back to back to back. So you're talking about 4 hours or so, 4 or 5 hours of this great programming, these great old monster films. Universal horror, Hammer horror. Again, we'll talk about Universal horror. We'll talk about Hammer. We'll talk about all those things. So I certainly transitioned into that motif. And I gained an affinity for these films, an affinity which I hold strongly today. And again, the fantastic part of this is that they're all available on the Blu-ray, on the DVD, on Netflix, on if you have a satellite system or a cable system, I promise you a lot of these things are there on demand for you. If you're a fan, you already know what I'm talking about. If you're listening and saying, oh my God, what is he talking about? Investigate it. there are lots of individual films and shows that we will discuss, and we'll spend time kind of unfolding what they were about and why they were so cool and why they are so much fun, and the details and the whens and the hows and the whos. There are a lot of standout titles that I want to share with you and recommend and talk about and articulate and have fun with. I just referenced a few on this episode, this set the stage, kind of let you know what kind of direction we may be going in. And we'll do the same thing in other areas. We'll talk about music and fashion and style, everything. It's going to be cool. It's going to be vintage. It's going to be something that we can enjoy and share and make a part of your larger life experience. I want to remind you guys that you can catch this show on the Blackwater YouTube channel. You can also catch it on Google Plus and on the Dr. William Lester Show Facebook page. So basically, every episode will be available on demand in those venues for you. And I want to invite you to listen and give me your commentary. Maybe there's something you remember that I've overlooked. There are a lot of things that were probably part of the soup, so to speak, and it may have slipped my mind, or I may have forgotten about it temporarily, and you remind me, we can talk about it, rekindle those memories. You can comment on, give me your reflections on some of the titles or other things that I've referenced here. Maybe you enjoy highball too, but maybe you have a different combination. Maybe you have a different concoction. What are your cigar recommendations? Again, we're a cigar-friendly show. And all of these things that bring pleasure to your life. We don't worry about the naysayers. There are two groups of people that will not find refuge in this program. They are two groups I refer to as the pleasure police and the morality mafia. And these are people who don't enjoy these aspects of life, and by extension, they don't want you to either. But who cares? Right? We will continue to engage in these great enjoyments, these great areas of enjoyment and pleasure and leisure. And it's a great deal of fun for me to share them with you, to talk about them with you, to bring them to you, to have you introduce things to me. We'll also make sure that the show is posted on my personal Facebook page, the William Lester. So that's another, so we've got the Dr. William Lester Show Facebook page, we got the William Lester Facebook page, we got the Blackwater Media YouTube channel, and we've got Google Plus. So plenty of opportunities for you to listen to the show. Download the show. You can download it as an MP3. You can listen to it on your mobile device, maybe on your iPhone or Android, or in your car, your MP3 player, whatever. There's a million ways for you to download or listen to the show. I'm looking forward to continuing this dialogue with you. It's early September now. We're coming into the fall season. Fall is my favorite season. We've seen the opening salvo of college football games. I'm a huge fan of college football, just so you know. So when I talk about what happened between Alabama and USC, when I talk about what happened between Clemson and Auburn, or Georgia and North Carolina, you don't have to black out, or you don't have to let your eyes glass over. I'm a huge college football fan. And it's a wonderful segue into the autumn season, the autumnal reality that we are coming into. And of course, we move deeper into the autumn and we get into October, and of course Halloween, and that's a fantastic situation, and we'll have a lot of fun with that, and what have you. So I really appreciate you guys listening and being a part of this. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to continue enjoying my wonderful cigar, my wonderful cocktail, and I will make sure that the show is up and ready for you guys to listen to. And I'm very grateful to everybody, and I will see you again right here, and we will cover all things cool and vintage. I'll talk to you next time.